Passion has the ability to fuel your ambition, to fuel your career. But the critical point is, are you doing what you love? And if you're doing what you love, does it necessarily have to be your career? I'll be speaking to a lot of you out there who are graduates who have just passed out. It's always a very tough time because many are focused and some are a bit confused, while some others just feel that they are getting into a new stage of their lives. I believe that these steps are natural, and what you go through as a process, equally natural, but what you do with it is what makes the difference. So let me start from the standpoint of you have just graduated, you are yet to go for your national service. The typical thing that happens is you have a preference for where you'd like to serve, but the question is, what do you want out of that experience? What exactly are you looking forward to? What do you want out of that location or geographic location or area? If you've not thought about it, this is the first thing you should think about. So I'm talking to those who have just graduated, who are waiting to engage the national service year, as we call it, in Nigeria. But beyond that also, I'll be speaking to the fact that in being able to walk towards that service year, your mind must be totally yielded as to where you want to be. When I finished my national service way back in 1989, two things came to my mind as we rounded up at the NYSC camp. Number one, what next? A job, of course. And I had to write several applications. And at that time, we had, management trainee programs being advertised. And of course, looking through the dailies, newspapers were our traditional form of seeking for jobs then. But it also occurred to me that in between that time, I needed to do something different. I wanted to test my hands on being an entrepreneur. So I went back to the NYSC camp and I asked for a space. I decided to do something, to take a stall and to call it The Hive. It was my first stage test on getting into entrepreneurship or doing business. But to make that happen, I had to engage with my friend and colleague, who was also a copper at that time, and we had a partnership. The partnership was, let's set up a place where coppers will come, enjoy themselves, and then we'll be able to provide some social succor, so to speak. We called the place The Hive. It was intentional because I had left camp and I needed a springboard in between when a possible job will come and something to test the work. We did The Hive, it was successful. And that gave me the impetus to then approach a bank. At that time, it was called the All States Trust Bank. And I applied for a loan of 10,000 naira back in the day. And I wanted to use that loan as a signature to start doing something I found was an opportunity then in Rivers State. That's Port Harcourt, of course, Rivers State. And you could ask me what that opportunity I saw. There were a lot of oil companies who needed services of people. So I came back to Lagos and I got my father to register a company for me, which I called Duren Service Agency. And Duren Service Agency was now going to provide manpower to support all the oil companies, either drivers, cooks, stewards, and all of that. I went back home to Akwa Ibom and I met a few of my friends who had relations who were not employed. And I gathered them together and was going to provide employment for them. So I'm saying to you, if you have a stopgap that you can utilize as a springboard before this choice job comes, you need to think about it. I believe that's the first thing you need to do. Many times I hear people talk about passion and they link passion to what they want done. For me, I see passion just the way you would probably project electricity. Electricity would do two things. It will power. At the same time, if not well handled, if you handle naked wires, they can electrocute. I see passion in that regard. Passion has the ability to fuel your ambition, to fuel your career. But the critical point is, are you doing what you love? And if you're doing what you love, does it necessarily have to be your career? It may not be. It could be a vocation. But many times people tend to use the word passion as a clear link to the careers they're having. Yes, it is a self-motivator. It is something that will get you into that level of motivation. However, when you get a job, the things that would drive your passion will be beyond your ability and your love for that job. You could just find yourself in a politically toxic environment and it will kill your passion. You can find yourself in the midst of friends and colleagues who actually are not giving you the right support. And what happens? The passion dies. So is passion critical to career success? Yes and no. But passion is an enabler, is a self-motivator, but would not necessarily allow you the privilege of making a career head start. What it does, it allows you to have a self-motivation that plunges you into whatever you want to do because you love it. So if I love singing, the question is, do I make singing my career or do I make it a vocation? And those are the clear points I think many of us need to really decipher. Is it your vocation or it is something that the world needs? Or perhaps is it something that you can get paid for as a professional? Now let's talk about young graduates and applying for jobs. First of all, what I've found is that a lot of young graduates copy and paste CVs. They do not write their own story. There's a template, I'll pick it up from someone or I pick it up from wherever and I make it mine. Very many times what they write down as their own curriculum vitae do not reflect their experience or who they are. There's a disconnect, the lack of preparation. They never prepare. They stumble on work, they stumble on jobs, and they go in an inappropriate way. What do I mean inappropriate? There isn't a connection between the job you are looking to take and you as a person. And it comes very glaring at the interview. When people sit down at the point of the interview session and you're asking the first question, most people drop blanks. I've had to sit in many sessions with young people, but some come very brilliant, very prepared because they've internalized what that role is and what they see and how they see themselves play. But the majority fail to come out well because they're ill prepared. Many young people make the mistake of just dressing anyhow, going for an interview. First impression matters. You need to create an impression. If you want to create an impression, the best thing to do is to look appropriate. And when I mean appropriate dressing, whether for a female, whether for a male, or for the role itself. So if you're going to apply for, well, to interview for a job that will require formal wear all the time, you can't go in there with a casual. And even if you're going for a job that is probably an engineering job where you know definitely engineers don't wear suits. But for the sake of that, it's appropriate that you find out what the appropriate dress code will be. There is nothing wrong with asking, what should the dress code be? There are dress codes. So find out what the dress code should be. Do not just assume and then get on the plane, drop into the place and expect everybody's going to answer you. That's not going to happen. The last bit I'm going to say in terms of error, when you are asked, how much do you want to be paid? Many people at the stage of the interview say anything. That's wrong. That means you do not have a sense of value of who you are. This also applies to very senior people because many times some just go and they balloon a figure. And when they ask you why you think you should be paid such an amount, you don't have the value to the table that would make you, say, this is how much I should be paid. You must know what you're worth. No matter how small, have a value. Don't say anything. That just means that you fall for anything. Now, when people talk about experience, you limit yourself only to what you have done, maybe after school. But think about all the little opportunities you had. And that's why, to those that are yet to graduate, that are still in school, vacation jobs, internships, all of those matter. They are experiences that you volunteer to support organizations and social causes. That's part of the experience. Embrace the spirit of volunteerism. Just make sure you can volunteer at the slightest opportunity you have. You can volunteer your services to close associates, to your uncles, aunties who are working in corporations, especially when you know where you really want to place your tent. If you know you want to serve ultimately as a marketing executive, you can volunteer, to go work for some agency. And I know transport, I know allowance, I know, but you can give some hours. The cumulative experience will come from your interaction and what you've been given to do. Now, if you find yourself doing this, I am sure the management of that organization will extend some courtesy to you to support you to make sure that you get into it. Now, what other way can you get out of this highly competitive space? Many people tend to upskill. They'll tell you, acquire a skill. Yes, I do agree that you need to acquire a skill. But if you don't have an opportunity to express that skill and be seen to be competent, what do you then do? You see why it's important that you volunteer? When you volunteer, it gives you a platform to be able to showcase that you have this competence, which shows that you have the skill in this area. And someone will extend that arm or that, extend that handshake to you to say, why don't join us? The second thing that I think is very important in a highly competitive setting is what I call networking. And this is where networking is going to be very well defined. Networking here, for me, look at 3 A's: your acquaintances, your allies, and your advocates. If you have people who can speak for you, your years of experience do not really count. But what counts is how well you've provided service to them or how well they've trusted you. So for instance, if you have met with me and stayed with me as a mentee, or I've had the privilege to work with you over a period, I would easily recommend you to some other person and say, I can vouch for this gentleman. I can vouch for this lady. She has what it takes to make your organization better if you employ her. Now, that's a way out of it. Why? Because of relationship. B, because of the service. And C, because someone has advocated for you. Advocacy does that very well. There's also the part around allies. You need to look at your network of allies. Who are allies? Allies are those that you have had to work together, your peers. Many of you have peers who look up to you in one way or the other, who you've supported or done specific things with, who can be your voice, who may also be your advocate in certain cases. But if you don't harness it, you may miss it because you just take them as, oh, he's my pal, he's my guy, and it stops there. But that guy could just jolly well be the stepping stone to that job that you're looking for. Remember, every job, every opportunity, every role comes when somebody recommends, when somebody refers. And research has proven that 75% of jobs are gotten via referrals. Minimum of 75%. That tells you that you shouldn't joke with your network. The last A, which I talked about, acquaintances. Many times you have to be very careful because acquaintances tend to sit in toxicity. People get jealous, people get into strife. So in a competitive world, An acquaintance may not necessarily give you that true pass. So you need to understand how you manage your 3 A's: acquaintances, allies, and your advocates. In a highly competitive world where you do not have that experience, managing the top 2 can actually give you the desired role or that opportunity you're searching for.